This is CBC Vancouver News.
Help us out by conserving the water that we have.
November is typically the rainiest month of the year for the coast.
Drought, floods, and air quality warnings. Parts of BC face a triple whammy of climate change threats.
It's not affordable.
My rent's $560. They've jumped the rent rate up to $17.50.
So simplify the construction and the permitting process greatly.
From big cities to small towns, housing is one of the key issues in this year's municipal elections. But what can communities actually do? And Skylight, a meteor puts on a show over the South Coast. Good evening, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. Parts of BC are facing a triple whammy of climate change-fueled threats. The latest is an air quality advisory for the eastern Fraser Valley due to wildfire smoke. And as drought grips most of our province well into the fall, Metro Vancouver is now asking you to use less drinking water. That means turning off the taps and putting away the sprinklers. Officials say current water use is running 20% higher than normal, while reservoir levels are lower than usual. From August to mid-October, the Lower Mainland typically receives 400 millimeters of precipitation, but this year, it's only 50.
You know, we're having warm, dry weather, and it's becoming really important that we have people really help us out by conserving the water that we have and really being mindful about how they're using the water to make sure that it's going to last until we get the fall rains.
The district says river levels are currently at record low levels for this time of year as well, and many streams are seeing very low levels. You're asked to take shorter showers, turn off the tap while washing dishes or brushing your teeth, and not to water your lawn. But even as BC dries up amid all this hot weather, the provincial government is now warning communities to prepare for flooding when fall rains do return. The drought has left soil parched and unable to absorb water. That means increased runoff and river flows. The province is standing ready to help people living near streams and rivers that have flooded in previous falls. Emergency Management BC is prepared to deploy 4 million sandbags to protect homes and infrastructure.
November is typically the rainiest month of the year for the coast. The other thing is we would, on any particular year, see a number of storms that actually hit the coast. Any one of those, depending on the storm severity, could have the potential for flooding.
EMBC is asking anyone in affected regions to be ready. That means having a household plan, getting emergency kits, and learning about the local government emergency plans. Words of disbelief, anger, but also support are pouring in about Mary Ellen Turpel-Lafon's refusal to provide evidence of her claims to Indigenous background. Last night, we brought you a CBC News investigation into the former scholar and judge. Turpel-Lafond has claimed she is a Treaty Indian of Cree ancestry, but her claims don't appear to match the historical record. She says that's nobody's business. Sam Sampson walks us through the mixed response and what happens next in the conversation about Indigenous identity.
A scholar, judge, advocate.
I want to tell you why I feel this agreement is very important for the Aboriginal peoples of Canada.
Now at the center of controversy, Mary Ellen Turpel-Lafond's own Indigenous background up for debate after a CBC investigation. Turpel-Lafond says she is a Treaty Indian, that her father was Cree, but historical records indicate her father was born to a white European couple.
It's everything from hurt and feeling betrayed to questioning.
Métis lawyer and advocate Jean Théier has written on Indigenous identity, spoken at conferences, and had been hired by institutions to delve into others' backgrounds.
They are taking the space up that was meant for Indigenous people. Could they have done this excellent work without taking on red face? Absolutely.
Turpel-Lafond has been accepted as a member of Muskeg Lake Cree Nation, her husband's First Nation in Saskatchewan, for almost 30 years. But Théier says membership is different from being biologically Indigenous.
You don't necessarily have to have Indigenous ancestry if the rules of the nation will accept you without that, okay? So let's put that aside. You can be a member. That doesn't mean you're Indigenous, though. It just means you're a member of that First Nation. You could be a white woman who marries an Indigenous man.
Those who stand behind Turpel-Lafond are standing strong. The Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations, the Saskatoon Tribal Council, the Union of BC Indian Chiefs. Many say it's not for the media, government, or anyone other than Indigenous people to determine who belongs.
We have the highest regard for Mary Ellen Turpel-Lafond. She's an amazing, brilliant woman who has accomplished an enormous amount in regard to her own personal journey. But more importantly, she has made absolutely stunning contributions to the advancement of all Indigenous peoples in this country, children and families, missing and murdered Indigenous women, youth issues, and so on and so forth. And we value her based on her work and her results, and we'll continue the relationship.
Some universities are working on or already have policies to avoid any doubt. The University of British Columbia, which employed Turpel-Lafond, says it relies on self-declaration. Some say while there are nuances for people who are not status, the way forward is verifying identity.
Can't open a bank account without an ID. You can't get employed without showing the university your ID. They want my social insurance number. I mean, why not? Does Indigenous governance not matter? Does it not count?
Turpel-Lafond declined an interview. She says CBC's questions about her ancestry are offensive and an invasion of her privacy. Sam Sampson, CBC News, Regina.
The lawyers for a Dutch man convicted of sexually exploiting Port Coquitlam teenager Amanda Todd now want him to serve less time in prison. That change came on the final day of a sentencing hearing. Aidan Coban's lawyers initially asked for a 6-year sentence, but today argued it should be 2. Earlier this year, he was found guilty of harassing and extorting 15-year-old Todd. Coban is already serving an 11-year sentence in the Netherlands for similar offenses against 33 young victims. His lawyer argues more prison time would be unduly harsh, but the BC judge says she's not bound by the Dutch regime and suggests the offenses against Todd are a separate matter. The Crown wants Coban to spend 12 years in prison after he finishes his Dutch sentence. The judge is set to deliver her decision tomorrow afternoon. Amanda Todd took her own life 10 years ago after years of online abuse from Coban. Vancouver police are asking for your help after 2 more stranger attacks this week. Take a look. On Tuesday afternoon, police say a stranger pushed a 93-year-old man over at Main and Pender in Chinatown. He broke his hip. Meanwhile, the force says a man punched a 29-year-old woman in the face and knocked her to the ground around 6:30 last night near Pender and Cambie. They're the latest in a long string of unprovoked random attacks in the city. A large fire tore through an apartment building in Burnaby this morning. It happened at Holdham Avenue and Pandora Street. 7 fire engine crews, 3 ladder trucks, and 2 heavy rescue teams showed up. 2 people were taken to hospital to get checked. Firefighters used ladders to save more than 5 people from their homes.
Residents, did the right thing by making early calls to 911. We were able to provide a very strong response from the fire department to aid them in evacuating themselves. But many of the residents did leave their suites without spending a lot of time gathering possessions, which is very good for their personal safety.
It's not yet clear what sparked the blaze. Emergency crews in Kelowna, meanwhile, rushed to a fire in a homeless encampment along the Okanagan Rail Trail this morning. A fire engulfed a tent with a person inside, as you can see. Mounties and firefighters were able to put it out before that person was hurt, thankfully. Police say the quick response more than likely saved other people who were also sleeping nearby. Officers say as temperatures drop, they're going to be working with the city bylaw crews to help people there find other ways to keep warm. This week, we're bringing you stories of the major issues facing voters in BC this election cycle. And if you live here, you know the cost and availability of housing is consistently a top election issue for voters. But what can individual cities and towns actually do to influence the housing and rental markets in their areas? As Michelle Gassoub is finding out, the answer is a bit more complicated than you might think.
In this election, there's one issue on everyone's minds, and that's housing, housing, and housing. Whether you live in Vancouver, Kelowna, or Smithers, and whether you're a homeowner or a renter, the cost of housing in this province is hitting people hard.
It's not affordable, For talking as a student, it's so difficult.
Horrible. I live in an SRO, and my rent's $560. They've jumped the rent right up to $17.50 and $18.50, 300 square feet.
Throughout this campaign, lots of people and lots of parties have made big promises about how they're going to improve the housing market. For voters with long memories, some of those slogans can be hard to believe.
And Handsome Gregor was the mayor for most of those 13 years, and his campaign promise was to end homelessness in Vancouver, and we have only seen an increase in homelessness, so I think they're empty promises.
The housing market is complex and affected by many market forces. So while municipal candidates are making big promises, what can they actually do to make housing more affordable?
We can have a completely different city in 2 or 3 or 5 years.
Experts say while it's not entirely in their hands, municipalities do have a wide range of tools to increase the housing supply, which might result in lower prices.
Simple building permits should be issued within a matter of days, not months or years. Access and facilitate access to land creatively, underutilized land right now. And then the densification part, that's going to be harder and it's going to take a little longer, but even that can very successfully be done as long as we focus densification where it's most beneficial and least disruptive.
Municipalities do have a lot of control over how they use their land, but consider some of the market forces that city councils don't have a say in. There's the Bank of Canada interest rate, the rate of inflation, as well as the BC Building Code, which is set by the province. And while cities can encourage new builds, they're unlikely to fund and build new supply on their own. City budgets just aren't built for that.
I think it's more challenging when you're looking at homelessness or units that need to be deeply subsidized on two levels. One, there's a lot of money that's required for that, and cities don't necessarily have access to the resources. So they need the help and the assistance of the provinces and the federal government.
From the biggest cities to BC's smaller communities, the challenges facing the housing market are immense, and the province's new municipal governments will soon have their work cut out for them.
They need to have action behind those promises. I didn't forget.
To make sure the promises of this election don't end up in the stack of unkept campaign slogans. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
And we're now just 2 days away from local elections across BC. Historically, about 3/4 of mayors who seek re-election are victorious. But here in Vancouver, Mayor Kennedy Stewart appears to be in a bit of trouble. Our Justin McElroy explains why.
There are just 48 hours left in this election, and maybe 48 hours left in the reign of Kennedy Stewart.
I'm running for mayor of Vancouver.
That's Ken Sim, and if you believe the polls, he is the favorite to become mayor of Vancouver on Saturday night. One poll showing Sim up by 6 points among decided voters, another one by 18 points. Now, these are small sample sizes, and British Columbians know polls aren't everything. But Sim is also winning the sign war. His ads are everywhere, and he's also getting more people searching for him on Google. In other words, there's a lot of indications that he has the momentum, which may be why most of the negative advertising right now is also about him.
Ken's bagels are pretty good. They have less holes than his policies. They should probably focus on these.
With flip-flops like these, can you trust Ken Sim on anything he promises?
Sim winning would be a big deal, but so would Stewart losing. It would be the first time in 42 years that a Vancouver mayor sought re-election and failed. And it would be the first time in more than 12 years that the left has lost any election in Vancouver. So why are things so close? Well, for one, you can go back to 2018. Kennedy Stewart beat Sim by just 957 votes, the closest election in decades. It meant Stewart didn't have a lot of room to lose support. But the mayor knows the last 4 years have been tough.
I wouldn't say the last few years are pretty good.
Since Stewart became mayor, the price of housing in Vancouver has gone up. Rents have gone up. The number of overdose deaths have gone up. The number of assaults has gone up. It's why the mayor said what he said, and why Sim has a simple closing message.
We can make Vancouver safe again. We can make progress in housing. We can unite the people in this city and craft a future we can all be proud of.
Now, polls can be wrong and a lot can change, but 14 years is a long time for any ideology to run a government, which means in just 48 hours' time, Vancouver could become Sim City.
One of Vancouver's most iconic hockey players is coming home.
Oh, I hit the stanchion and came right back. What a heads-up play by Kevin Bieksa.
Heads up indeed. Kevin Bieksa with the winner in second overtime to send the Vancouver Canucks to the Stanley Cup final in 2011. The Canucks announced Kevin Bieksa will sign a one-day contract so he can retire with the club where he first started his career. He'll be honored on November 3rd against the Anaheim Ducks, the only other NHL team he's ever played for. Well done, Kevin.
It will require public investment. That is my whole approach.
Aspiring Premier Anjali Appadurai unveils an ambitious healthcare plan, but the NDP membership controversy continues to take attention. That story's next. And hello to everyone watching our commercial-free live stream tonight, especially those of you now joining us on YouTube. Great to have you here. A Toronto attraction known as Little Canada is now planning to make the entire country smaller. Last month, they sent 4 of their artists to the Maritimes to get a better feel for that place before rebuilding it.
We're here to capture all of the East Coast, capture its essence, so we can create the most authentic miniature version of what we see.
It's been a long trip. We started in PEI. We're getting a real feel of what the cities and towns are like, and we're trying to just really capture the feeling of the East Coast.
Welcome to Little Canada.
Little Canada is a new tourist attraction that we're creating. We're making all of Canada in miniature form.
So it's everything you would see in the big Canada, just shrunk down to 87th scale. So everything is teeny tiny. There's little cars driving around and, you know, whole mountains fit inside a single room.
Oh, there's like a rooftop.
The challenge is definitely getting everything to fit in. As much as like we're doing miniatures and everything's tiny, it's still limited space, and so we really have to like pick and choose what we put in and what goes where and how things relate to each other, and being able to do an accurate representation and like an authentic representation while still having to work within these really tight constraints of space.
This is good for animations.
I build a lot of the tiny little structures, and I'm so excited to do all the small, colorful, cute little things.
It's so beautiful. I'm overwhelmed by how amazing the scenery is. My part at Little Canada is storytelling and high details, but the scenery is just incredible. Wow.
I think it's just really interesting seeing the scale of everything, because when you're looking at photos and stuff, you don't really like see the whole picture of like what everything is and how it all relates to each other.
I didn't think it was going to be as mountainy as it is. There's hills everywhere in St. John's, which I did not realize. Everything is a hill. After this, we're driving up to Deer Lake, and we're going to Grossmoyne. So I'm very excited to do the boat tour through Grossmoyne. And then we're heading home after a long trip.
BC NDP leadership hopeful Anjali Appadurai released her ambitious platform on healthcare today. The climate change activist is running against former Attorney General David Eby. But as she spoke about policy, as Mira Baines tells us, Appadurai faced more questions about membership sign-ups.
We're trying to make changes in this plan that will move us towards a more home-based, preventative, team-based type of care, which actually reduces burdens on the healthcare system.
Anjali Appadurai, a climate activist, promises a 7-point plan to deal with the province's healthcare crisis if she becomes leader of the BC NDP. She wants to give nurses a 25% raise, implement a full provincial safe supply program to help prevent overdose deaths, and scale up community health centers to replace urgent primary care centers.
It will require public investment. That is my whole approach. We must invest in the systems that are essential to life and well-being.
Meanwhile, David Eby, who stepped away from his role as Attorney General and Minister responsible for housing, has been on tour this week. He announced his housing platform after being criticized for not being visible enough during the leadership campaign. Appadurai's campaign has been active and even holding a fireside chat with UBC Professor of Climate Justice Naomi Klein. Some political watchers say her ideas are good.
No, I think it was good that she brought in the health plan. I think it's got a lot of good ideas in it. I think it's helpful for her in the campaign as she tries to distinguish herself as more than a single issue candidate. But there are some issues in there that deserve some scrutiny.
The race is heating up. The two leadership hopefuls could be facing off in the first debate on November 5th. That's if Appadurai isn't disqualified over membership issues. The NDP and Elections BC is looking into her membership sign-ups and if some members are also members of the Green Party.
I support a respectful approaching of folks who are holding dual memberships and asking them to choose. But beyond that, I don't support the assumption of fraud. We've brought in thousands of new memberships to the party.
It's a strange position for the New Democrats, which has been on its way to coronating Eby as leader and premier.
But clearly there's a constituency within the NDP and within the progressive left that sees something in her that she's tapped into. She appears to have signed up quite a few members.
The BC NDP says the work to verify the integrity of its membership list is ongoing. The party's provincial executive is set to meet next week. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
There's a live shot of the Port of Vancouver. We are still at least a week away from rain. Johanna will have your BC-wide weather forecast right after this.
When is a newspaper not a newspaper? When is a free press not free? In Vancouver, it's not a newspaper when the mayor says it isn't. And the free press isn't free when the mayor can close down a West Coast hippie newspaper called the Georgia Straight simply by taking away its business license. He says it's obscene, it's undesirable, and it has to go. So far, the courts have agreed with him, but the other Vancouver newspapers haven't. Tim Kotcheff caught up with him on his Saturday night out.
I'm holding a copy of the Georgia Straight here, and on the top it says banned by the mayor.
Yes?
Why did you suspend its license?
Well, I think the answer is quite simple. This is was a filthy rag. It was being distributed in our school systems, in our Sunday schools, and I just wouldn't tolerate it, and the only thing to do was to cancel their license. Just read it. I'm sure that if I started reading it right now, that your station wouldn't carry it. I think this is the biggest issue that's hit Vancouver in the last 20 years. I've received over 2,000 letters from indignant citizens of Vancouver who never write the mayor. I was assassinated by the local press, claiming that I was oppressing the freedom of the press, that this was wrong. This is no press. This is just filth. It shouldn't be sold by the issue. It should be sold by the yard.
Do you think this paper is as bad as some of the others on the stand right now? Hush, Flash, Justice Weekly?
None of them go out to the Sunday schools and the schools and peddle it. I know of instances where people have gone into the Sunday school classroom and taken the collection to buy this paper.
What if they continue to sell the paper or distribute it on the streets of Vancouver? What are you going to do?
I'll take the appropriate action.
What's that?
That's my secret.
Do you know any hippies?
Do I know any? Sure, I know some. As a matter of fact, my dog bit the editor of this paper. He's a most intelligent dog.
Hold it, baby. Hold it.
Housing, safety, transportation, and climate change. What do the next 4 years look like? Who will win, and what will it mean for you and your family? Tune in to CBC News for in-depth analysis and context. Join me this Saturday as CBC News presents BC Votes, live commercial-free coverage of the municipal election starting at 7 p.m. Until then, get up to speed at cbc.ca/BC Votes.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace, installing the most reliable heating and cooling brand. It's hard to stop a train.
Time for our BC-wide weather forecast with meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe. Joe, we talked about it earlier. Triple whammy: drought, threats of floods, air quality advisory. BC's getting hit hard.
Yeah, and it seems never-ending, relentless if we look back on the past year and a half. But all of these events are adding or fueling the next one. For example, our unprecedented drought that's happening right now, that's sparking late-season wildfires. That's adding to late-season wildfire smoke. And as we've been talking about, that is leading to hydrophobic soils, which means big concerns once we get the rain. I'm not seeing the rain right now. I will break that down in a moment. But look at the air quality index extended in through the Fraser Valley earlier today. You probably noticed, though, through the day, the brown haze. So we'll look for that right across the south coast the next couple of days. It's just Fraser Valley out towards Princeton that conditions are concerning for health. I want to show you a snapshot taken yesterday from space. This is the Pacific Northwest. You can see the coast and Vancouver Island up there on the top left. This is a snapshot 1 year ago. The same satellite 1 year ago from yesterday. And now a lot of this is cloud. We had a lot more cloud and rain 1 year ago, but also notice the snow. We already had snow in our high elevation mountains. So really, let me see if I can flip that back and forth today and 1 year ago. So quite the contrast, and all of this will have trickle-down effects, literally. We are seeing a lot of rain in towards Haida Gwaii, although Prince Rupert, Haida Gwaii, look for some sunshine tomorrow afternoon. As that front moves in early next week, there's a chance we'll see a temperature drop, which could be nice. And I am watching that swirling low for about 10 days from now. That's our first chance of seeing some real rain. Until then, temperatures 10 degrees above seasonal in the interior. As we head into the weekend, we will be breaking all-time October temperature records for the interior, and we're going to go for it in Abbotsford as well. Look at that forecast, Dan. A little bit of a drop Monday, Tuesday, but for the first time, I see rain October 22nd. So that's next Saturday, and I'll have to watch that closely.
We're going to mark the calendar.
We will.
Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
And you may want to go look up in the sky before you go to bed tonight in case one of these flies by. Around 10:18 last night, a meteor turned the darkness into blue light across, well, most of North America. Well, the West Coast, I should say. It lasted about 6 seconds, but many people from North Van down to Oregon saw it. Astronomers say while seeing a fireball is rare, the fireballs themselves are pretty common. There you go. That's your late news for Thursday. Thank you for joining us tonight. For news anytime, check our website, cbc.ca/BC. Your next local news is on the early edition on CBC Radio 1. That starts tomorrow morning at 5 o'clock. Zara Premji will be your late host here tomorrow night at 11. I will see you on CBC Vancouver's Municipal Election Special. That's on Saturday, starting at 7 o'clock. Until then,